all the way back, baby.
Yeah, and if we say book your hotel, you book your hotel. But my lord, I have soiled myself.
And now, another episode of The Way We HNC It. Good evening, good afternoon, good day, good morning, wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of The Way We HNC It. My name is Bez, and it is a pleasure to be back with you once again. We have a cracking conversation to bring you today, and I hope you're all sitting comfortably. I am joined, as always, by our newest of co-hosts, Mr. Cammy Wilson. It is evening for us now, so good evening, Cammy. Happy Pancake Day. How are you, sir?
I am very full of pancakes and happiness. It's been a long evening with my daughter making pancakes, who is, I'm hoping, tucked up in bed, but after all the sugar we've consumed, probably not.
Good. And and I'm going to save my question because you've heard him giggle already for this evening. As you probably know, when you clicked on the icon for the show, we are joined by Great Britain's sports psychologist, Casper Farrimond. Welcome, Casper. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yes. And happy Pancake Day to yourself as well.
You know what? I completely forgot it's Pancake Day. I feel mortified that I've got a 1-year-old son and I'm not allowed him to have pancakes on a Tuesday. It's just, I feel I'm an awful parent. So this is a great start to the podcast.
So great start. Hi, I'm your guest. I'm a terrible parent. So I think we can probably have a battle between parenting choices though, with no pancakes
Absolutely.
and feeding them loads of sugar before the wee one goes to bed, Cammy. I'm not sure. And yeah, thankfully not a choice I have to make right now. So but yeah, okay. Question one, and I find in interviews, question one really, really sets the tone. So,
Okay.
So Casper, if you were having pancakes, what is the topping of choice?
Oh, do you know what? I'm actually really, really simplistic. So I'm either sugar and lemon juice,
Sugar, classic.
or
though.
raspberry jam. That's it.
Raspberry jam is good.
I'm really simplistic. I remember going once to a pancake shop in Amsterdam, and they're big for crepes and pancakes over there. And they gave me like a massive sugar load of chocolate, strawberries, the whole lot, and I hated it. And ever since there, I've got to just go back to the basics: sugar, lemon juice, or raspberry jam, and that's it.
That's the classic. That's like that's like what I remember as a wee one. Like it's just like lemon and sugar.
Yeah, it's so simple, but so. Do you know what? Sometimes I agave syrup. So Golden's banned in this house, and honey's banned as well. So my partner's vegan. So the only thing I can have that's close to that is agave syrup.
Agave syrup. Oh, okay. So that's like the alternative. That's the vegan alternative.
Sometimes that's actually quite nice as well. So if I'm feeling cheeky or adventurous, I'll go for the agave syrup. But if I'm feeling like quite low in confidence, just stick to what I know.
Stick to what you know. Love that. Cammy, what was the choice with the wee one today?
Elle had, oh goodness, I don't even know. It was a mess, I know that much. There was lots of chocolate spread. I'm pretty sure there was some Biscoff spread put on there as well, and I made her have fruit as well, so there was some raspberries too. But I'm much the same as Casper. I am a sucker for sour things, so it was lemon juice galore with a bit of sugar as well. Try to be healthy, so not too much, but you know,
nice one.
You can't.
I went rogue tonight because I was in a shop and I'd never seen it before around Christmas time, and like Lindor, like the chocolate. So they do chocolate spread, right?
Yeah.
And I discovered this. Takes maybe you've already seen it in the cities, right? But it takes a while to get to the Highlands, right? So I found this. I found this a little while ago, and made my pancakes today, and like had kind of forgotten about it, and opened the cupboard and saw this. And I was like, I mean, surely like Lindor chocolate spread on a pancake is can't be terrible. And I've now set myself up for failure for the rest of the week because it's not a very big jar, but it is amazing. So
Wow.
I think
Too rich for my blood, man.
it was like the tiniest little spoon. It was like the tiniest little spoon, and then it went all melty, so I could like spread it around. But, oh, yeah, I think I might be up as late as L, to be honest, with that all coursing through my veins. So,
What we've learned tonight is Cammy's the one that likes to stay in his comfort zone. You're the one that likes a bit of adrenaline when it comes to
yes,
pancakes.
yes, pancake. Yes, adventurous pancakery. There we go. That'll be it. That'll be the next novelty T-shirt. Adventurous pancakery. But yes, we are.
What a strong start to the
What-
evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Opening 5 minutes. This is where you get the viewers. This is where you get the listeners in, and you hook them. So we've got them with pancake toppings. So yes, of course, Casper, you are the Great Britain national flag football team's sports psychologist. You've been working with them for a while now, and tonight we're going to kind of go on a little adventure through the sports psychology world, how it pertains to kind of the elite squads, and maybe also what kind of our weekend warriors can take both into flag and to other sports and kind of into their own daily lives, I guess. So in terms of just yourself, what's your background in, have you always leaned towards sport, or is, where did Casper come from?
Yeah, do you know what? I've got quite boring story to be. I wanted to be a sports psychologist since the age of 16. It was always really, really clear. And not a particularly exciting story, but I remember watching, I don't know which Olympics it was, but I was watching the Paralympics, not so much the main one. And I remember just sitting there kind of being in awe of kind of watching these athletes with like disabilities and hearing their life stories and kind of going, how are they even just turning up, let alone performing? And I was getting mesmerized at going, what is it about them that they can push? Because it could be so easy to like feel sorry for yourself and go, do you know what? I just want to survive life. But they've got to kind of shut themselves down and kind of, do you know what? I'm going for it. So it got me interested in it. And I went to like, as you do at 16, you have a chat with an educational person going, what's your next steps? I just said, look, I tried to say like mindset or something. I said, I'm like sport. Can they go together? And she, luckily at the time, she was studying sports psychology or something. And she said, have you thought, yeah, it was just lucky for me at the time. So she said, what about sports psychology? I was like, all right, that sounds cool. That sounds funky. And then obviously studied it at A level, and that's where it confirmed that's what I wanted to be. So simplistic story, but the idea was if a para athlete can do that with no help, if I can understand what they do and how they operate mentally, can I help the everyday athlete and the everyday person to reach the same levels and believe the same level that para athletes do?
So like, when you're studying like sports psychology, do you go through like the normal? I say normal. Like, do you go through like the kind of clinical psychology route?
Yeah,
and then
you
branch
won't
off?
necessarily go through clinical. So when you're studying, you need to do your undergraduate degree. You kind of do two areas. You do your sports science area, and then you do your psychology. So you have to learn touch upon a load of different areas from like developmental psychology to social to the scientific side of it to clinical, but only just touching upon it to give you an overall idea of stuff. And then if you love something, the idea at your masters is to specialize in a route that you're passionate about. So obviously, I learned from that even after 3 years, that I still want to go down the sport route. And then I obviously did my masters, which I specialised in applied sports psychology. And then that set me up for obviously my training that I went on to. And then now I'm obviously a few years down the road from that, and obviously midway through a PhD.
That was going to be my next question: is have I been addressing you correctly?
Not at the moment, I'm just Casper. Just at the moment, I'm still a few years away from Dr. Farrimond, which still has a weird ring to it. But hopefully soon that will be on me. I'm not someone that likes to kind of put titles behind my name and stuff, or glorify who I am, because I'm claiming to be quite humble. People around me may disagree, but I don't like to blow my own trumpet. So I like to be known as Casper. It's a lot easier, a lot less stressful.
No, that's cool. That's amazing. So, like if we're, sorry, Cammy, on you go.
So is there a specific sport that you orientated around before you came into the flag
Yes.
scene, or
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you mean as an athlete or as a psychologist?
both? Yeah.
Yeah. So as an athlete, I was dual sport. So I was football and swimming. Um, I was better at swimming, but more passionate about football. So I reached a high level in swimming. Swimming started just as like any kid that you start when you're young learning to swim, and you really were quite good at it. And then I just kind of progressed through the ranks, got up to county level, which is again, I guess it's probably quite common nowadays. Could have gone further, but I didn't. I think I fell out of love with it, whereas football was always the love.
Yeah.
But weirdly, I left both sports at 15, which is an unusual time to leave, and I
It's
left
quite
them due
young.
to
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite young. And given bear in mind I've been playing since the age of like 6, 7 years old, I left them both due to poor coaching experiences. So the who I was getting coached by made me believe the sport was horrible, wasn't nice, and that if I kept going with it, I was going to get more and more miserable. And I would have realised as I got older that it was just one experience of sport. Sport itself isn't like that. But I was quite stubborn and moody at that point in my life, and decided, you know what, I'm going to stand up to these horrible coaches and then leave, and then they'll regret it. I never know if they regretted it or not, but I left them at 15 and I missed it. So I spent a few years just sort of, I guess, being a lazy hobo, and then finally took up running and took up marathon running because my dad's a marathon runner. He's done about 40 different marathons around the world, like New York, Moscow, London, and did the London
Wow.
Marathon when I was 19. Completely unprepared. So you clearly see in that as an athlete, I needed a psychologist, but I never tapped into it. Maybe that's another reason as to why I pursued that career. So yeah, I became a runner, and then when I was at university, I took up squash, which I think if anyone's looking for something for a bit of anger management, squash is utterly brilliant for releasing that tension. Honestly, especially
Yeah.
if you have kids as well, it's brilliant.
There you go, Cammy,
um,
Glasgow's next great squash player.
I know. As a sports psych, it was quite different. So when I came out at my masters and I was showing how can I break into the scene, how can I get some hours as a trainee, I was recommended to not go for an elite, well-known, popular sport because it'd be overcrowded. So I was told to go for a sport that was less well-known within the UK. So where I was at the time was based in Milton Keynes. The two sports local to me were ice hockey or handball.
Mm.
And again, nationally, we're never great at. So I contacted handball, and that kind of springboarded my career because I've now spent the last 10 years in handball. I was lucky enough that the local guy around the club was the former GB captain of the Olympic handball team when we had the Olympics in 2012, and which is just
Wow.
very fortunate
Yeah.
for me. And in the space of 6 months, I went from going just sort of supporting at a local handball club amateur level to working with the national setup, the talent pathway, and then fast forward a few years, I was then getting involved in UK funding projects, culture development, and I'm now involved with developing handball coaching courses, loads of stuff. So that was a sport that really springboards my career, I think. The other sport I did on was there as well. Oh, at that age in my career was kayaking, which again, if anyone asks me, I am not outdoorsy. I can't stand it. I like to be under a blanket, wrapped up. I'm a bit of a princess. But my mate was a kayaker and he's an elite kayaker. And again, he offered me opportunities to get involved and threw me down the river a few times to go, look, come on, you need to know what it's about. It is lovely. It's adrenaline. It's exciting, but I won't do it again. But again, that was my new experience. So being involved in these sports that weren't well known allowed me to start to get some hours and develop as a sports site. Fast forward like 9, 10 years, and now I've worked in about 12 different sports. So I'm quite varied in my experiences.
Yeah, it's quite a very good mix to have, especially so you've got your swimming and your football that are
Yeah,
very well, swimming obviously being individual and then
yeah,
football being coming from a team background. So the background you've got in sport certainly wouldn't hinder you coming into this profession at all. So yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
It's interesting that you mentioned like negative experiences with
Mm,
coaches.
mm,
So like my education is in sports coaching.
mm,
And when I was in kind of my undergraduate years, you like get shown like you do like a module on sports psychology, but obviously it's like such a massive and ever
yeah,
expanding field, and it's normally taught by like the not like a non-expert. So it's just like
yeah,
and it is right. It's like it is the
yeah.
reality of it is unless you're at a top uni, which I did not have the grades for. You right? They're normally not. There's normally not like a sports psychologist like on lecturing staff who can like come in and deliver, like a couple of hours a week. So a lot of it was based around kind of like learning theories and then kind of how that applies to sport. Do you, when you were going through your kind of sports science and sports psychology, is it like, does it work the other way around? Like, do you get like a bit of, like kind
As
of
in
coaching stuff?
Sports coaches coming in.
Yeah, like do you, because like, so when you're learning to be a coach, they spread, especially undergraduate level, they try and teach you like a little bit of everything, like, and then obviously the more you progress, the more it kind of, specializes. Is that the same in like the sports psychology field? Like, are they bringing in like sports coaches to be like, you'll have to talk to an athlete at some point and they're all nuts, so this is how you might want to go about it?
Exactly. So I had to, because like I said, I was dual honours, so I was doing a generic psychology degree alongside sports science. So the sports science was just as broad. So I covered a range of different areas, from like sports coaching to PE management to skill acquisition to motor control. Because I think as a sports psychologist, you have these ideas and principles around behaviour change, but you have to appreciate the context in which you're working in. And when we're doing our degrees, a term that they kind of bounced around was a thing called contextual intelligence. So you've got to understand the context of which you're working in. So that's why we have to be taught by sports coaches and people that are outside of sports psychology, because you have to come together when part of an institute.
Yeah. And then you end up getting thrown down a slalom course in a kayak.
You do pretty much, yeah. You do. But I think one of the things that I learned, and like I said, when I was an athlete, like I think in terms of sports psychology, the most influential, most important person in the whole institute of sport is the coach. And
yeah, 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and as a sports psychologist, I feel I can make a greater impact through the coach and maybe the senior leadership team, as opposed to one-on-one or directly with the team, because the coach is responsible for what we call a psychologically informed environment. So if I can deliver these messages and theories and ideas, which again I'm an expert in, but I can sell it to them. He can, I guess, retranslate it and make it his own, and deliver that to the team. It's going to have a much greater long-term impact than me just directly going to the players. So yeah, for me, coaches are crucial to not just work with, but also understand who they are. So I really appreciate in my undergrad, especially kind of getting to know what coaching is and what coaching philosophies are.
Yeah, it was always like, and it was like the sports psychology discussions were always, like they were, and at least in my kind of coaching grouping, they were always like the popular ones, because I think like as athletes, especially at that stage in your life, we were like in our early 20s, so most of us were still playing sport as well as being baby coaches.
Yeah,
like you're trying to like suck stuff in that you can use now actively, as well as like, okay, I need to know this for in that other role. And you were also, it was also up against like the next lecture was like it was all about like negligence law and how to not get sued. So like it's way less, it's way more fun to be doing like it's way more fun.
I appreciate coaches. I've always told myself, like, right, if I want to work with someone, I've got to understand from their perspective. So when I came out after my masters, I told myself I've got to do some sports coaching and appreciate how hard it is. So I decided to become a primary school PE teacher. It wasn't like I didn't do a teacher placement out, I didn't do a PhD, but through a company I did some sports coaching in schools. Did it for, I only survived 1 year. I was like, I'm never going back again.
I mean, like
do you know what? And that's why I really appreciate what coaches do, because
primary school sport is like, it can be as like a coach, it can be like one of my long running sessions that I used to do when I was like in the Wall in Aberdeen was I used to run the 5 to 7 year olds rock climbing course.
Wow.
And that was at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday for an hour, right? 10 to 11.
Yeah.
5 to 7 year olds rock climbing. And most of them never got more than like their own height up off the deck, right? But there were sessions where I walked back in the door after saying goodbye and waving them off. Okay, guys, well done. That was amazing. Like, see you next week. And I would go back in and I would just be like, cry, But then there's like the other times when because it's just chaos, right? And they like, they're 5 years old, they don't want to be there, and there's nothing any, there's nothing anyone can do about that other than
Yeah.
like make sure they have a good time.
Yeah.
But
That's
it's also super rewarding, though. Like it's unbelievably
Yeah,
rewarding
that's
when they
like-
learn the skills and then move on, and you can have, But yeah,
Obviously-
primary school sports is crazy.
Yeah, honestly, it do you know what? It battered me. Absolutely battered me. I was like, my God, like if I can't cope with this, can I even work in sport? Thankfully, I was a bit more. I was made for sports psychology, but not as a coach. But right. And I feel like as I've gone through sport, I think if you coach older athletes, it's a little bit easier. But primary school, if you want to really test yourself, coach the kids. They will be honest and tell you
Yeah.
whether you're good enough or not.
Yeah,
It's like, so from my own experience as a youth coach, like 6-7 weeks ago, my son was who is just about to turn 10 was in an under 11s tournament, and the team he was playing with, I think they played 4 games, they only won 1, and he was just delighted that he got on the pitch. He was loving it. Whereas my under 15 teams at the weekend there they lost the final, and they're all devastated. And it's like, obviously the world of sports psychology is massive, and then if you want to break that down through the age gaps, I don't want to go too deep into this rabbit hole because we'd be here for hours, but learning how to work with kids who have such, like, half my team were buzzing that they made the final and with how they played, the other half were like, yeah, but we didn't win, we lost by a score, we could have done better. And like seeing that, even like in myself sometimes, it's crazy how emotionally developed some children are compared to others and how they take it. Like it's like,
and as a coach, you've got to manage that. You've got to keep everyone happy. You've got to be able to respond to them individually. Ones that are pumped up, great, you can manage. Ones that are down in the dumps, the ones that are critical of themselves. That's why being a coach is so difficult. It's not, you're more than just a coach. You're a motivator. You're a mentor. You're a counselor. All these different things, and you don't get trained for that. And I think,
oh god, no.
yeah, and again, exactly, and that's why like I have so much respect for coaches that work in sport, because a lot of them put so much extra hours and energy into it. Some of them might even paid, and I see that obviously with American flag football, like it's the same thing. Like a lot of them is voluntary based, and it's purely the passion that drives them. So we're very lucky to have coaches in this world.
Yeah, for sure. Fully agree. Preaching to the choir. Yeah. So how did you make the leap from, how did flag football become sport 13 on the list?
Not a crazy story. Very simply, Liam Harper, which is the current captain of the golf squad, gave me a message on my website going, "I'm looking to get some people in to help support the team, and psychology is one thing I'm curious about. What do you fancy? Do you fancy it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sounds cool. Sounds like a date. All right." So I was like, "Do you know what? Because you've never done it before. I don't know where you guys are with psychology. I'll just give you a freebie session. I'll do an online session, explain what psychology is, explore your understanding, get some ideas flowing, and why it could be applicable to your sport, and we'll go from there." And that very first session, bearing in mind that I wasn't expecting to hear that players have had many experiences with psychology, which they hadn't. They were all so open, so positive, so willing to reflect, which is so rare for a first session. Bear in mind they've never met me before. It was usually the Scottish lads that were more talking than the English lads. That's what I've learned.
Unsurprising.
That's what I've learned, but it made my life easy. So thank you, Scotland, for making my life easy. But it was such a pleasure. And I came off going with a big smile. I was going, wow. Do you know what? Even without using psychology, they've used it kind of subconsciously. And then from that, I was like, okay, well, it'd be good for me to give you some actual session that's more applicable to your current situation. So I think at the time it was like June or July, and they were due to go to the Euros in Limerick in, it might have been August 2023 or July. I can't remember the exact date.
Yeah, it was.
And so I
later in the year.
decided to do, I guess you'd call it a pressure mindset based workshop. Just more around kind of how you're going to mentally manage yourself over that intensive period, and little tips and tricks that you could use just to obviously be the best you could be, but sometimes just survive because it's such an intensive experience. And
Yeah.
I was very conscious as a sports psychologist that I didn't want to teach new things because that takes time, and I'm always about integrating habits. So in the early sort of couple of sessions, it was more about kind of let's reflect, let's come together. You'll probably know a lot of solutions that you can use. You're just not aware of it. So just bring it to the surface. I can make some little tweaks, and then you've got a good foundation to work with. And once you're back, we can then go a bit more deeper and learn some new ideas. So yeah, those first 2 sessions were really, really good for me to kind of get to know the squad.
Nice.
And obviously, I left a good first impression because when I reached out a few months later, just to see, kind of curious, do you wanna pair up again? I thought we had a good relationship. You know what I mean? It'd be a shame if we stopped dating now. And yeah, obviously I heard they were doing a nice response, and then the rest is history now. Now I've been regularly working with them for the last, I think, give or take 12 months.
Yeah. So like earlier on when you were talking about context, like when you get this message that's like flag American football, and Cammy and I are not going to be offended by this. Once you'd kind of been like, those are words that don't normally go together.
Yeah.
Like, did you do some like research? Did you
Yeah, absolutely.
like?
So it's so important if you think about context is to understand the sport. So typically my go-to approach will always be play the sport. Obviously I'm a bit old now, I'm a very brittle human being. So I thought, you know what? To save myself to stay alive, I'm going to probably just watch some videos, ask people some questions, and just watch things. So again, I know a guy called John Wise, and he's like the encyclopedia of American football. So
He
I
is.
had a chat with him, and he again blew my mind with it. Had a chat with Liam, it was lovely. And then I learned a lot off it, and thought, wow, I've never known. And again, I'll be honest, I didn't really know about the sport, so I couldn't appreciate it, probably because of how much it's publicised in the UK, which is a shame because it is an amazing sport. But after doing the research, like, you know what, I really get involved in this, and seeing the attitude of the players just in the goal scoring line, I was like, you know what, if that's like it in one squad, I can't wait to see what other squads are like, because that would make my life easier. And I could really make a really good impact because the willingness and the open-mindedness of flag football players.
It is very like you said there's a whole lot of people in this sport in the UK now, and I think the standard is so varied that you get teams who are there just to have fun,
Mhm.
and then you get teams like Hornet, like Cardiff, like London, who are upset with anything besides first. So there was, like the
Yeah.
final in 2023, sat down with Dale Kirby for about an hour. Hadn't really spoke to him much before, and I knew the expectation for the Hornets going the week before finals was to go in and win it. And I was saying to coach that, like, look, we know the path that we are expected to take, and we know we're expected to go into the final, and everyone is looking at us to beat London, like to be the team that come up next. And I don't think I'm going to be able to perform. And we
Mhm.
had sat down and had a chat for it was about an hour and a half, just going over through like basic fundamentals, and we didn't really speak about psychology as such
Mhm.
itself,
Mhm.
just the motions that I was going through and how I was
Yeah.
feeling, and the difference that had alone. Like you said,
Yeah.
like the one session you had and you felt the connection that you had with the players. That hour and a half that I had with coach was probably somewhat relatable as well. Like it's
Yeah.
difference it can have
Yeah.
on anybody would
Yeah.
it's like something I'm really, really passionate about, and something that I try to get people to speak about a lot more in the sport, because while the community is very tight knit and we're all very friendly, it's not something that's discussed as much as it should be, and
Mhm.
it's not something we should support each other as much as we should
Yeah.
with. Kind of waffled
Yeah.
a bit there, but
No, it's great that you nailed it. That is the power of psychology. One conversation can completely redirect you in where you're going, how you perform, and how you feel. And that is psychology. That's what I would do with the players, running through, talking through what they're feeling. The key thing for me is having them understand what is causing them to behave in a certain way, think in a certain way, because if they can make sense of what is occurring, that alone can be a strategy for having them perform better, because it helps
yeah,
them normalize it. Oh, that makes sense now, and that can subside it, and then they can move on from it. And once you've done that, the next part of it is that person you're having a conversation with is empowering them, going, look, you can cope with this. It's easy to think negatively, pessimistically, doubt your abilities, but you also have the choice to have a second perspective as well. And by having that chat with the coach, it sounds like he obviously redirected you into a more optimistic mindset going into the game, which was brilliant. That again, coming back to my original point, that's why coaching is so powerful. And for me, like a lot of my job I count myself lucky as a sports psychologist because I don't feel like it's very difficult. And maybe that's probably saying it, but like as long as you can be compassionate, empathetic, listen, and then respond to their needs, you can make a massive impact. And that's what I always try and aim to do with individuals and teams and coaches.
When you're like joining a team for the first time, or you have a new athlete,
Yeah,
what does your like process look like for? So
yeah,
you get the call, like, so to use the flag team, like you get the call from Liam, you're like, yeah, sounds good, we'll set up a call.
Mhm.
You do your research. So now you kind of, right, I understand, I've spoken to John, I've spoken to Liam, session one's coming. Like, what's your kind of process for because I'm sure you felt the same, like in a coaching mindset, you're like the first meeting, like, and it's like a job interview, I guess. Like
Mhm.
you're like, like you everyone can relate to going to a job interview. And one of the things I think people often forget is like you're also interviewing the company, right? In
Mhm.
that situation. So like when you show up to your first session with a new client, a new athlete, a new team, whatever, what's your process to like kind of set your stall out, but also like try and get information back so you can understand like where they're at?
Do you know what? The first step isn't getting information. I haven't got a right to know stuff of people straight away. The term that I always use is called vulnerability modeling. The idea is I'm coming in and everyone's aware it's mindset and it can be scary sometimes, and they think I'm going to have these deep conversations. I'm going to be critical of things. I'm going to investigate stuff. Not the case at all. So the first thing I need to make sure is that I'm going to expose myself in a vulnerable state because they're going to feel vulnerable as well. So I go in there like anyone else and I get to know them. I help out with different things. So I call myself the water boy. So if I have to clean up kit, I have to get involved with setting up stuff. I will do that first of all. Just getting to know each person on a personal level, build that relationship, build that trust. It sounds simple, but it's so powerful. And I've often found that if you
Yeah.
establish a good relationship with someone, that will significantly influence the success of your work with that person and the interventions that you use because they'll buy into whatever you say, which you can say is risky, but that's why trust is so important. So number one will be just getting to know each other, have normal chats, not about sport, but just getting to know each other on a personal, holistic level. They can see me as well. I'm willing to share me and who I'm about. And once they feel trustworthy, feel like they're trusted, and they feel safe, then the next job will then be moving into right, having the conversations with the right people to understand the current situation of what works and what also doesn't work. Because again, it's very easy to think that I come as a psychologist and I'm going to be looking at all the things you do wrong, but you don't do that. It's that myth of sort of psychology. You want to start off with the strengths and what's going well, and sometimes they're not aware of that. And I want to build off that first of all, because they're a lot easier to build consistency with. And if they get a bit of thrill and excitement from it, then it makes it a lot easier then to look at the things that they're not so good at. And I never use the term weakness. I always use the word enhancement, with the idea there's things that you're good at that you can be further enhanced. So
Yeah.
yeah, simple process, get to know, show vulnerability, and then have the conversations with the right people. The early stages can be quite slow because I need to really make sure I'm understanding the context in which I'm working in.
Yeah, like you say there, like the languages,
Mhm.
like super that you use is like super important, right? So yeah, like the strengths and weaknesses model is like inherently
Mhm.
negative, right? Because it makes people are scared of their weaknesses, or the old
Yeah,
like
yeah,
SWOT models that I've seen sports teams do before. Like the word threats. It's like it's pretty, like you
Quite
don't really,
yeah,
intense.
yeah, but you don't really, and you
yeah.
don't see that in the kind of the modern, like even like 15, yeah, 10, 15 years ago now when I was taught, oh, if you have your teams, you can do kind of, you can work with them on the SWOT model and stuff, or the
Mhm.
whatever when it gets all the extra letters and stuff in your. And
Mhm.
nowadays, you would never be taught that as a coach because it's like you'd be bringing in this kind of like negative energy
Yeah,
at the start of the
yeah, yeah,
exercise.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so have you like over your like what? That's maybe a tangent. What have you seen now over like the course of your career that kind of maybe you would never have even thought would be like a kind of a learning point, kind of
Yeah, I
when you were
mean,
doing your masters?
yeah, for me, when I was doing my master's degree, when I worked with sports athletes, I saw them as athletes, which meant any conversation I had with them was around sport. and I neglected all the other parts of their life, the parts of their identity that are going to spill into sport. They make them who they are. And it was only after kind of a few years later that I realised that there was all these ideas and solutions and principles and perspectives that I could have used, but because I kept seeing them as an athlete, I neglected or was unaware of all these other things I could have talked about. And again, I learned as well when you treat them as a person as opposed to an athlete, you make a much greater connection with that person. So that's probably one of the biggest learning curves for me, especially with coaches as well, realizing they're human beings as well, and they're under tremendous pressure and demands to succeed and make players the best they can be, and they get a lot of flack for that. And for me, by talking to them as just human beings, like I do when I go into a club or individually, it makes such a difference being more holistic. It's hard sometimes to be holistic because you need more time to do that and ask more questions. But for me, 9 times out of 10, by being holistic, I make a much greater impact versus when I was more sport focused and narrow focused and I was a trainee site. It limited how effective I was.
Yeah, I guess it's like you're investing, aren't you? Like you're
Yeah,
investing the time in early to have
yeah,
that larger impact. And it's
yeah,
funny what you say about athletes, like when you start to um you see them as the people they are. And if we think about like the elite level of sport, like it's the top athletes in the world in whatever discipline
mhm,
are often the ones that are also completely comfortable
yeah,
in who they are, and they're you know like Usain Bolt was obviously the fastest man, but he was also like no other athlete anyone had ever seen because he was just
yeah,
so comfortable in
Relaxed,
who he
like
was and
yeah,
relaxed, and like fist bumping the guy that stands behind his his lane marker, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
running like 9.4 and just like being like what.
I know, it's great.
And he was, I think he's unbelievable.
And,
But
and you know what's bad about that is like is society gives that a bad rep. It's like someone's boosting themselves up, self praise, self compassion, and they go, "Oh, like how egotistical and arrogant is that? What's wrong with
yeah,
boosting
right.
yourself up? You let other people do it. Why can't we do it for ourselves?
And
That's
it's
something we can control. But why are we criticizing Usain for doing it and other athletes? They've earned the right to do that, and it works for them. It gets the best out of them.
yeah,
So why are we sitting in the sidelines going, "Nah, that's not right"?
yeah, and it's like it's one of those things. Like one of the what was it? I can't remember if it was in a book where I saw it, but it was in a might be in a book while I was at uni. But the quote was, "Whether you think you can or you can't, you will be
Mm-hmm,
right."
mm-hmm,
So, like like you have to, like if you're an athlete at Olympic level,
yeah,
you have to believe you're going to win the race, win the match, win the game, throw the thing the furthest, jump the highest, like whatever,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because otherwise, well, you mean you wouldn't qualify in the first place. But when people then show that, everyone knows that to be the case, but then if they show it, they're very often torn down again.
Yeah,
It's a very
yeah, yeah.
weird
It's weird, isn't
societal.
it? Because it's and often I think it's because it's just a jealousy thing. People are afraid that people are sad because they're not to that level. They're jealous of the success. But one of the things I always say with athletes is like if you want to perform at your best, you have to go into autopilot mode. So you're not thinking, you're just doing it. And the only way your brain will activate that or be activated is by self assurance and trust. And if it means blowing your own trumpet, being big and bold in front of a crowd, you do that. If you want to be quiet, then that's okay. But if you want to be the best version of yourself and allow your autopilot to take over so it's simplistic and easy for you and you go with the flow, you need to be self assured. And that is a hard thing to achieve when society criticizes you for doing that and saying, like, you need to be open to criticism and look at the things that you're weak at.
would you have any advice for people who are quite outgoing in relative circumstances, like they're sitting or like if they're at training with their team, for example, and they are quite loud, they're quite passionate, but when it
Mm,
comes to the bigger stage, they don't feel like they can be that person because they're not confident enough. Is there
yeah.
anything that you'd sort of point towards to try and help them?
Yeah, for me, it comes back to understanding who you are and what gets the best out of you. And I mean, I understand, obviously, you've got to understand from a social perspective as to why they're feeling triggered that they can't be this person they want to be. But sometimes they don't always realize that they need the energy. And so one of the things that I would always say is that people around you, they don't tell you facts, they often tell you opinions. And once you realize who is coming from a good place and who's not, you can start to minimize how much that has an impact on you. If you then may realize from that conversation with someone, oh, I've got this teammate who was putting me down, telling me to be quiet because I'm disrupting the atmosphere of the team. It was just because they were competing for the same position you were, and they were trying to get in your head so you would lose performance. As soon as you realize that it's just an opinion,
Wow.
as soon as you realize it's from an opinion, even though you're part of the same team, you realize it's an opinion, you go, right, thanks for the opinion, but I'm not taking it on because it's not supporting me. And then your job is then go, right, it's going to be challenging, but I need to remind myself what gets the best out of me. And if that means feeling fired up on the day and being loud and vocal, you go do that. And if you then see that and get successful in once and then do it repeatedly, eventually you'll get to a point where you're like wearing armor and you won't care what other people say because you know that's what you need to be the best person or the best athlete that you want to
So,
That's a great response.
I
I
mean,
love that.
we'll clip that. Would it be when you were saying, you were talking about the autopilot
be.
kind of strategy to find, and I know it's hard because we're discussing like the generics, the generic athlete, but to try and find that autopilot, are you looking down the line of like the habit forming, like what makes you feel
Yeah.
good already and enhancing on that, or is there like, do you kind of have like like how do you go about helping athlete A
Yeah,
kind of
well,
find
the
their
first,
autopilot?
yeah, it's not so much finding autopilot. We know it's always there because when I ask the question, go, can you go back to a game where everything felt effortless? It was smooth. Everything you did just came off, and you came off the end of it kind of like with energy left to spare. That is your best performance. So, and we always have one, at least one in the sport. Because if we've not had one of those performances, it's unlikely you've stayed in the sport.
Mhm.
So I try to say, look, have you got that? And they go, right. And they go, do you want to do that again? Do you want that performance again? And they go, yeah, okay, great. So then you try to go backwards and go, look, why do you think, or what do you think occurred to get to that state of mind? And they will then go, well, actual fact, I felt a certain way before the match. So what their job and athlete is to do is to try and determine emotionally where they need to be before the match, then activate this autopilot. So as an example, some athletes need, like I said, vocal, be loud, be really, really pumped up. Because when they feel that, they feel energized and they go mentally, right, because I've got the energy, I can be the best version I can be. But for some athletes, if they're pumped up, they can feel very nervous, jittery, thinking too much. So those ones tend to be like, oh, I need to be calmer and more relaxed. So when I'm relaxed, I can control what I think and then switch on and switch off. So your job as an athlete or working with someone is to try and determine emotionally where you need to be, because that can be one thing that will activate the autopilot. Obviously, you've got to remember as well that autopilot will only occur if you've done things repeatedly. So that again, that's why as an athlete, you need to make sure that you need to relax and go, look, you've done this 101 times. It's in there. So it's like a door and you've got a key to it. But if you get nervous, the natural thing that athletes tend to do is then start to think about how to perform. And it's what we call the reinvestment theory. So you're reinvesting kind of conscious awareness, which will then, when you're performing, will fight the subconscious. And I always use the metaphor. Imagine there's one lane on the road. It's two cars trying to fit into one lane, and that's why you have a disruptive performance. But if you step back before and go, "Right, I'm going to take a few breaths, relax, and just go, right, I know it's in there. I need to trust myself and remind myself why I'm good." That will be another thing that will then make it more likely for you to go into autopilot once the whistle goes.
Just on the back of that as well, then, is there anything, so spiraling can be a big thing in this sport as well. Like
Yeah,
if you
Drop
hitch the
passes,
most
for
basic,
example.
yeah, a hitch is the most basic route in this sport. And if you drop that, you're like, oh, right, okay, I'll get the next one. Happens
mm-hmm.
again. And then you spiral and then you get nervous. What would you recommend for someone to then break that cycle? Like
Yeah. Do you know?
let's
Yeah,
talk like game scenario. So you're in a game, you don't have time to actually stop and think about it. Is there any techniques or anything that you'd
yeah.
advise to try and
Well,
help?
your answer just said it. You said there's no time to think about it. So if you can't think about it, you need to do something physically to disconnect or unhook from what's going on. And the problem that athletes tend to have is when they make a mistake, they put more pressure on themselves to redeem
Yep.
themselves. but then that's coming from an emotional effect and adding more pressure, which isn't always good. So the idea is before you bring in some type of positive instruction, is you need to do something physically to release that buildup of energy. So that's why I say think of emotion as energy. Everyone needs a certain level of energy to be at their best. Some need more, some need less. But if you will know if it's too much because you'll feel like you're shaking. Imagine like you've got a bottle. I use this metaphor way too much. But imagine like you've got a bottle of Coke that's got Mentos thrown into it and you've shaken it up. It's about to explode. If you to rip the cap off, it goes everywhere. So imagine like the player version would be one more thing goes wrong and they lose their head.
Yep.
But the idea would be is you need to let loose the fizz a little bit and let it slowly come out. So as an athlete, if you recognise that you're kind of getting a bit more riled up, spring back to your starting position, reset a bit of your kit, take some deep breaths in, change your body language. There's loads of things you can do to physically release some of that energy. Sometimes you need to do more than one thing. Sometimes you may just need one thing. Once you've physically reset the body, then you can bring in whatever type of instruction or self-talk that you want to use. For me, I'm very big on once you've reset, go present because it's simple, a very narrow focus, and you can use very generic questions such as, right, what's my job right now? Or look up. By looking up, your eyes automatically start scanning around in front of you and look for something. As imagine like you've got a hook thrown around, you've thrown a hook around, you go, right, I see that, and you hook onto it. But if you don't give yourself that little prompt, because you're nervous, frustrated, whatever you want to call it, you tend to be looking down, and the focus you've got is the mistake or the emotion. The brain's really smart, but also really, really stupid. So you need to give yourself, you need to give it a new focus. You don't give it a new focus, it'll just stay on it and get worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's why you need to be
Yeah.
simplistic. Go right, keep it narrow, keep it instructional based or motivational based, and then off you go.
Again, great answer. Thank you.
Yeah,
This is
so
purely for my self benefit as well. Like,
yeah. Cammy's, you can send Cammy
I'll
a bill
send you an invoice
afterwards.
after the
Yeah,
podcast. Right?
fully. So yeah, like it's interesting. Like I've never kind of considered consciously considered the act of pull your flags out, put them back in, or sprint somewhere or something. I'm a breathing guy, and yeah, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I've got my dumb brain on, but I found and it's probably a term you've come across as well when you were kind of talking about that, like autopilot. We've all had that feeling, like in a flag sense, I've played, and Cammy wins more matches than me, but I've played in hard matches before and just been on the sideline and like a couple of minutes into like a 40-minute game being like, oh, we can't lose this game.
Yeah.
Because it's just like you have it, like I don't know what it is, but it's you feel it, right? Like it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was, when climbing was my job in my life, there's entire routes that I've tried and tried and tried and fallen off and fallen off and fallen off and fallen off. Then I pulled on the starting holds and then I topped out. And I couldn't tell you the middle. And we always refer to it as like feeling the flow.
Yeah.
Like this flow state, you're chasing this flow state and you're trying to get into it.
Yeah.
And you're trying to, and especially in kind of adventure sports, where at the top end, the risk is not losing the game. The risk is like much more severe physical consequences. But it was something that was, again, a decade ago, starting to come in, like trying to unlock that, like how you get that feeling, not at will, but in a repeatable basis, because like when you're on and you recognize it, it's arguably the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, and it's sad because once you recognise you're out of it.
Yeah, right. So
yeah, because that's the thing with, and there's actually some suggestions that the flow doesn't exist. It's a myth. Everyone describes it differently, but the idea is like I can't remember the order that's off my head, but I remember when I did the research years ago. It said that 8 different things have to occur at the exact same time for you to go into the flow state. It's mad, yeah, and that's why it can sometimes be so rare, especially if you're chasing it, you'll never find it. Whereas if you take there's a couple of things like you can do it like by being present, being relaxed, giving yourself a controllable plan, remind yourself who you're about and your strengths. So it can be some things that can bring you closer to it. There's also several environmental factors that can dictate whether you get it or not. But when you have it, it's an amazing feeling. And modern stuff that's kind of now replacing it a little bit is a thing called clutch performance. You might have heard in some sorts of context use it. So clutch performance is like the flow, but it only relates to critical pressure moments. And they say in that moment, awareness can be good because some athletes actually play better under pressure versus when it's relaxed. And when things are under pressure, it sends an adrenaline through. Like rock climbing, certain people are accustomed to it because they like the adrenaline. Adrenaline gets something out of them. So in a clutch performance moment, you go, right, there's something at stake. It's nerve wracking. I love this feeling. When I get this feeling, I perform at my best. So you've got to have a bit of awareness as well involved with that. If you don't have it, you will never know what's at stake. So you won't get the best out of yourself.
Yeah, I definitely like the environmental factor is like 100%. Like I think like I still know the best boulder problem I ever climbed. Like I know but I don't really remember the actual. Like I've thought about this a lot. Like I don't really remember the actual Sengo. I've got it on video, so like I know I did it because I saw it happen, and I was standing on. I remember standing on the top. But the environmental factors were like it was like my best mate. We were in Spain on the side of a canyon at sunset. I had like one more go. I felt great. We'd been there for a week and a half already. Bang, 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 and it was just like it wasn't hard.
No,
I've been falling off this thing for a week.
Smooth and easy. Someone was watching you going, how have you done that?
And it was just, but like you say, like being aware of it would have been off straight away because on the previous goes, like you're thinking about like I didn't hit that hold right or I didn't do that, and it's the same in a flag football sense. Like if you're having a bad day at the office and as like Cammy, you'll know this well enough as a receiver. Like you can be telling yourself it's not going well 2 steps in. Oh, my get off wasn't very good there, right? Or as a blitzer, like I didn't get the snap right, so the quarterback's already got half a second. And like at most levels of the game, that the only person that knows that is me. Right? Like no one on the sideline knows that I didn't get the release I wanted. Nobody on the sideline knows that like I missed the snap or whatever, but I do. And if I'm telling myself that before I've even got to the center, like I'm already, I'm slowing myself down.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like I did this with like I didn't do this with the GB squad, but I did it with another squad where I kind of gave them the data around the subconscious mind, which runs the autopilot habits versus the conscious mind. And the subconscious is like 10 times faster. It can, I think, it's in terms of like how much data it processes, it's like 11 million bits of information per second. Whereas the conscious mind, which is when you're talking to yourself, is like 40 to 80 bits per second. So they're way slower. It's a lot more sluggish. So that's why the idea is when you're performing, you need to be as present as possible. And sometimes not be in your head. You want to be. I always tell athletes about use your 5 senses, especially your kinesthetics touch. So like say when you're rock climbing, like the way the rock feels, it just feels right. The grip feels strong. These different little things, they're cues, they're triggers to tell you that you're doing a good job. And they're instructional based. They're not emotional based. So it removes that kind of opportunity for the brain to worry, especially when we know the brain is neurologically programmed to be negative because it helps us protect ourselves. So that's why being present is good because it minimizes the impact of the brain wanting to reflect and review choices made.
It is crazy when you think about the brain like that as this, tens of thousands of year old thing that has like, it's, we're talking about playing, like the GB Gold Squad, right? They're going to play flag football in Paris, but like at some level, your brain is like, stay away from that tree because there might be like a lion in it.
Exactly.
There was a really, again, going back to the conversation I had with Dale before finals a couple of years ago, he got me to listen to a podcast which was about the theory of challenge and threat states, I think it was. And like they break stuff like that down incredibly. Like it was eye-opening to see like how you can respond, like when you were talking about like the clutch factor and stuff like that. Like like it's the brain's a wonderful thing, but it's also, as you said, can also be really
Yeah.
stupid as well. So
Yeah, it's a really good point there, because challenge and threat, the kind of this principle plays around language of how you frame something. The facts are
yeah,
the same, but you frame it differently. And so the idea is a threat, it could be a threat, which then brings nervousness and anxiety, or it's a challenge, then going, do you know what, I like a challenge, I'm competitive, I'm driven. And then by looking at it going, you feel a bit of nerves, it allows you to make room for those nerves, but then you realize it's not debilitating, it's actually going to help you. So I always say that when we're nervous, it gives you energy. And then what your job is to create rhythm with those nerves, that energy, like writing a song. Like it's all over the place. You're trying to compose a song, put your body to a rhythm, and then it'll flow really, really nicely. Whereas you don't do that, and you don't control your breathing, you get all tense with your muscles. The song is going to sound horrendous.
Yeah, that's a yeah, because everyone in sport obviously talks about rhythm, right? Like
Yeah,
you hear
yeah,
it from everything from, basketball, get shooters in a rhythm. You hear,
mhm,
in American football, number one line in commentary, oh, the offense is really getting into a rhythm, you know.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, like every sport you can think of is all at some level rhythm
Yeah.
based.
And it comes down to like that you as the athlete have a choice in terms of how you associate with a situation. Your brain's like a filing cabinet. It's got all these different critical moments, categories it's gone through. And depending how you emotionally saw it and how you framed it and thought about it, the tone will either be positive, neutral, or negative. Well, it won't be neutral because if there's no emotion attached to it, your brain won't store it. Long-term memories are stored because they have emotion attached to it. Other things that you have emotion to won't be stored in there. So the whole idea is you need to recognize certain moments, critical moments where you may have something you may not realize it, a negative or unhelpful frame of reference. So you can
Mm.
realize that and then go by changing your language the way you see it, which is done very well with other people, getting conversations. You then allow you get control of the situation and go like, right, the situation is the same, but the way I respond to it could be different.
Yeah, and I guess like to use you as an example, like how long did it take for you to realize that you didn't like swimming wasn't negative, the coaching experience was negative?
A
Because
long
that's a big
time.
one, right? Because a
Yeah, a
lot
long
of people
time.
think they don't like a sport, but maybe they do like the sport, but the
Yeah,
environment they were in
yeah.
has that negative
Do you know
like
what? It was quite a long
foil on it.
time, and it was because I remember sitting with an athlete who was going through that. I mean, you know what? Sadly, it's a very common conversation I have with youth athletes around 16, 15, 14, 18, that coaches are having a negative influence on how they feel. And I remember this one athlete who was a swimmer, and again, empathy is very important as a sports psychologist. But I was probably feeling a bit overly empathetic because the way they were describing the way they were getting treated, like this old-fashioned army sergeant coach who was
Yeah, yeah.
drilling the kind of let's stretch you to the limits because that will make you stronger and better. And only being critical, I was going, oh my god, it's like I'm seeing my own self in another athlete, and I couldn't bear it. But I was like, you know what? Obviously, I'll go right. So it's part of the process, and it can happen in sport. But I wanted to make them realise that sport is bigger than one person. And once you recognize that, you regain control. And sometimes the thing you have to do is you have to change environments and leave the squad. But you can go to another one that can allow you to reframe something. But I never did that as an athlete. I just like both sports. In my head was like, well, if it's happening in two different sports, doesn't matter where I go at this age, I'm going to get criticized and I'm not a fan of it. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to bow down to it. Which if I had someone just to talk me through and go, like, it's okay. If you love the sport so much, you could stay in it, but just respond to it differently. And like I said earlier, people's opinions are not always a matter of fact. You're not compatible with everyone, and that's okay. But I didn't realize at the time, and it was only when I was working with these youth athletes, I was like, it's so sad. But I now realize all I needed was a chat with the sports psych, and it could have made a difference.
Yeah. I really found that with running.
Yeah.
Like when I was at school, cross country running, hated it.
Hmm.
Absolutely hated it. Didn't
Hmm.
run anywhere that wasn't between the white lines of a football pitch
Yeah.
or some kind of sports pitch for
Yeah.
since I was like what 13, 14
Yeah.
until the pandemic, and that was all you could do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like 5 times a week I'll be out running.
Yeah.
It's like a major part of my like mental health routine is to like go for a run and
Absolutely.
run
And it's
big races and dot about the mountains. Like,
yeah.
but yeah, and I mean I can't even remember the PE teacher's name.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
cross country was rubbish.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know what? I was the exact same as you, Bez. Like the idea is like when you were doing it when you were younger at school, you were told why you're doing it. So someone else is giving you a why reason. or the passion behind it. So you were never able to internalize it, and the reasons that you were doing weren't very pleasant. Whereas when we get older, we have a chance to take control of something and then go, actually, why do I want to do it? Oh, it's for my mental health reasons. It gives me a routine. It allows me to connect with other people, whatever it may be. Then you connect to it, you internalize it, make it part of your identity, and that's where a passion is formed with the sport.
Yeah.
Um,
It is crazy, like
yeah,
how much those those like environmental factors
yeah,
when you are young. Because I remember we ran, like I have this, I couldn't tell you a PE lesson I did at school other than this one. And I don't know what we'd done, right? As a group of boys at PE, we'd clearly been not the diligent students that our teacher expected of us. And the like discipline meted out for that was to run a Cooper test, right? Which for those that have never done a
oh
Cooper
yeah,
test, it
horrible.
is 400-meter track. You run around it as fast as you can for 12 minutes and then you stop. And I think we did that twice in the hour-long session, right?
Yeah,
So it was like running was not only like miserable, because you're like 14 and don't care and you're unfit, but it's then like it's like when you see coaches doing like any type of exercise as a punishment. So like coaches that do push-ups as a
hmm
punishment, like I hate it because
hmm
you are enforcing in young people's minds that like strength and conditioning is negative. And
yeah,
we know for all sorts of reasons when you grow up, especially when you start to get in towards like master's age, that strength and conditioning will both prolong your performance in sport, but also prolong
hmm
your quality of life. When we're talking about kind of the much higher end of the spectrum. So
hmm
teaching like 13-year-olds that exercise is a punishment is just like it's crazy
yeah,
to me now. But at the time, obviously, you just didn't was completely unaware that that was even a thing.
yeah. And it's a shame though because that's the only relationship you remember. And this is why like I don't want to be too like passionate about it, but my PhD is in how coaches support the development of optimism in athletes as they get older. And I look at it from a personality point of view, so not just a one-time thing. It's like you as coaches can make an athlete optimistic in everyday life and genuinely expect good things to occur. And you don't I don't think you understand sometimes how one wrong strategy like using punishment or one bad word said can reach or change how they develop as a human being. You're developing life skills in them, and if you do it wrong, these people could be pessimistic for the rest of their life. So coaches have a very, very, very like powerful um opportunity to manage, and sometimes they get it wrong. Like I see, and it hurts my feelings. I hate it. At the same time, they can also do an amazing job. And like I said, they're much bigger than like just coaches. They are like if not better than psychologists. They can be so powerful in dictating who someone becomes and how they navigate critical moments, how they see situations.
I've suddenly become a lot more nervous about being a coach to a bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds.
Sorry to say that, yeah.
No, it's. But
Yeah.
personally, my whole ethos was they're giving up their time to come and play football, and they just want to have fun. I'm not
Yeah,
there to.
exactly.
It's, I'm not there to, as much as I want to be a positive influence on them. Like I'm not there to give them into trouble. I'm
Yeah.
not going to like kids are kids. They're there to have fun. It's,
I think I've
anyway,
still got my entire binder of youth squad coaching notes and all sorts we can compile. Yeah,
yeah.
coaching 15 to 17-year-olds. And yeah, I mean, I loved it. That was like, as far as my coaching
Yeah,
career has been,
yeah,
that was like the absolute high point, that age group for those
yeah,
couple of years. And they were amazing and they were challenging. And sometimes I would, finish my shift at the wall at 10 o'clock at night and go home and just like not sleep because I'd be like,
yeah.
they are driving me up the wall, which is fine because in a climbing wall, you're supposed to go up the wall. But at the same time, you're like, but it was probably the most rewarding job I've
Oh yeah,
ever,
God,
I've
yeah,
ever done.
yeah, yeah.
So if we look ahead in the flag football calendar, obviously you were involved with the Gold Squad just before Limerick, and then
Just for Limerick, and then the whole build up to the Worlds.
the build up like through the Worlds. So when you've got that much runway and that much time, and obviously you're still with them, and we've got like the rest of the year
Yeah.
to Paris. Yeah, kind of almost in contrast to the like, what? How do you get to know them? How do you plan out your like for your not sessions, but like how do you plan out your work with them from like
Mm.
now through the month beyond Paris?
Yeah, so the idea was, and this was done, it was done with at the time Alan, the head coach, and it was done with Liam. So the idea is like obviously if you want to be the best team that you want to be, it's one team, one mindset. And so it's a shared mental model that everyone's got to buy into, everyone's got to understand it, and that forms what we call team chemistry. And I said, look, we need to investigate, come together, understand what we believe team chemistry is, and then create a shared mental model through looking at different topics around what that is, how to form it, and then build upon it and make that a habit. So, and then we related it when we related it all to the underpinnings around clutch performance, because the one thing that they felt like that the Euros that they didn't perform with was when it came to the pressure moments, they were missing, partly missing. So I was like, okay, that can be the backbone of like, right, we want to make sure that when we're in these pressure moments, individually and collectively, how can we stay composed, stay confident, and be the best player we can be in that moment? We're not guaranteed an outcome because sometimes the opponent's better, but as long as we can do everything we can do, we'll leave with no regrets. So I was like, right, we'll look at that. So the first session I ever did in that build up to the Worlds was right, what is clutch performance? What's team decision making? So we run through the different types of decision making processes, which is like the implicit, quick decision making and the long term logical decision making. To know when to use each one. And then we're like, right, as a team, what can you do to contribute to helping teammates activate those decision making processes? And a big part of that, every session that I did was around a thing called emotional contagion, which the idea is like, imagine there's a string that goes through the whole team. One person can influence the emotion of that team. So it's like it's contagious. So I was going there, if you want to make sure that in these clutch moments that you're being the best you can be, one of you or all of you needs to role model a positive emotion, whether it be something you say, the body language you show, or the actions that you do, that will increase the chances of you having these clutch moments.
I mean, between Dr. Liam Harper's walk-off sack in Spain being one of the most clutch moments in that whole tournament, and then David McAnally's pick against Japan, like what you've done's worked. Like, obviously,
Yeah,
those were two of the biggest moments for us. But like Liam's sack against Spain, what there was three. We had to run that play 3 times because of refereeing decisions, and they still managed to come up with it. So
yeah.
like if you need receipts, you've got them.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, like, it wasn't a perfect situation. Like these sort of things, they take a long time to develop. So, Fez, when you think about Olympic build-up and stuff, it takes not. I was starting the process. It's something that had never been done before, and it was only 6 months before the Worlds. And again, I only had one session per camp, and I was then speak to them. I would then be on the sidelines at every training session, chatting away, being part of the group. It was all lovely. That I only have 1 day per month, so you're limited in terms of how much impact you can make and
Yeah, of
it's
course.
relying on the players going away and going, right, I want to think about it more to make it happen. Because doing it once a month is difficult. So we did a lot of research and we created a thing called it's called a VMP, which I called it a very meaningful plan. So that's what the shared mental model was. So the V standard for values, so the principles that underpin the team, and we had 5 of them. We then had M, which was the mission statement, so what you were trying to achieve through those values. And then finally, P was daily promises. So there's little non-negotiables like taking care of each other and listening to people's needs. Those things, as long as you do that, you'll get to a better outcome within the tournament. And one of the values that they were big on was brotherhood. And again, that takes a long time to develop, and you're expecting a range of different characters to come together and be united. And sometimes that doesn't always happen, even if you have good intentions. But there's again, I would be the proudest psychologist here. But there was a picture taken of the team against France, and Liam will probably tell you about this. They're arm in arm, the camaraderie. And again, we'd actually run through this. So the last session before they went out to the Worlds in Loughborough, we'd gone through managing cognitive demands before the performance. Go, look, your brain's going to be working at like 110 miles an hour here. You can't do new things. So look, let's kind of, I mean, they learn like if you want to be quick and impulsive or quick and instinctive in decision making, you have to familiarize the brain with that scenario. So whether that be visual imagery, running through the scenarios. We had three key scenarios that we ran through, and I put away the teams. And they decided how they would react. And one of those scenarios was if you're losing in a game, what would you do to increase the chances of you bouncing back? I don't know what the score was at the time, but obviously they weren't doing great. Mentally, weren't there. And then again, I wrote again, what values can you use in key moments? But then came up emotional contagion, which is the underpinning of the shared mental model. Emotions came up, and obviously, I don't think they won the game. They got very close to winning. So you could argue could have been if they'd done it sooner, could it have got even better? If there'd been more time to train and prepare, could we have got through it even further?
Yeah.
But that was an example of like they really understood it. So going into the Olympics, the idea would be you build upon that and you can do more and more things around that shared mental model. You may change the values of who people come in. You may freeze and unfreeze stuff. You may change the daily promises, but the idea is at an underpinning what is your core, what's your team identity, who are we, then how do we go about doing that? They were very big on being process orientated because one of the things that we identified in terms of our super strengths was they felt like the team was smart, and the idea is like we need to be smart and use it effectively. That's still I think a work in progress with that one, but again, there was moments in the world where you saw that where they were smart with the moments they had. So my idea would be continue to work on all of that. So by the time we get to the Olympics, those things of being smart, the brotherhood, using the emotional contagion, they're all ingrained habits, and you don't need to be prompted to do it.
Yeah, it was like that, because like we were getting the photos basically like straight off of almost instantly off of Andy's camera
Mm,
while they were coming in, and I vividly remember that photo, the photograph that you're talking about coming in,
mm.
and it'll probably make quite a good maybe a cover image for this episode.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it was a 1 point game, and it was France again,
Mm,
and this year we're probably going to get at Euros, we're probably going to get another crack at them as well. So,
mm.
now knowing that there's a story behind that, in the sense, not that it was planned,
Yeah,
but that there was like knowing that there was a context to that and a story to that, because without that it was like they were obviously a close team. Like all
yeah,
the stories that came out of all the camps, all the stories that came back from Finland, the guys have all said kind of like how close they were, and
yeah,
how
Yeah.
how good a feeling there was in camp. And like these are like, it's like 12 of the most competitive dudes in the country, right? Like they're gonna take their final finishing position and be like, man, we should have done better than that. But like it's also the World Championships, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard.
yeah,
And
yeah,
but there's other squads, and you always hear about it in the afterwards across sports, right? Like
yeah.
teams that, especially sometimes, teams that are expected to do really well and don't.
Hmm.
Afterwards, you often find out that they just it just wasn't,
Yeah,
they weren't there. They didn't have that bond.
yeah,
So the plan, the shared mental model that you're talking about, that is like a foundation, but it's changeable, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
the
Absolutely
12 people
changeable.
that are there will not be the 12 people that are
Yeah,
there.
exactly. And I think that was always important to remember because the fact obviously there's a change of head coach now, and there's obviously Olympic sports. There may be people coming across that have not been in the sport before. You've got to be open minded to flex and adapt, and that was a big thing that I was big on. And the idea is right when you start the journey again, a new journey to the next competition, you go right. Let's unfreeze it. What we're keeping, well, we'll freeze that, and then what we're going to add. And again, that is a delicate process. You take time to do that because you have to appreciate everyone's point of view. The team chemistry, I was very strong on this. It's a dual process. It is coaches and players, or everyone part of the process. They all have a role to play in influencing and knowing what the shared mental model is. Because if they don't buy into it, only one person, again, like think of the string, one person with a bad attitude, it will go through. It's like poison. It'll quickly spread.
Yeah. Talking about not quite as long term as what you're looking at post Euros this year, but immediately after, what sort of like your process with me and my kids? I tell them that they've got 24 hours to commiserate or celebrate, and then the book's put on the shelf. We're on to the next chapter. Like it's what do you try and install in your athletes for
Yeah,
immediately after a win or a loss?
decompression. So the squad had this actually after the Worlds, which I didn't have after the Euros, was appreciating that you've just spent however many months building up to this big experience, having goals in mind. Yes, you'll be happy with what you've done, but there's gonna be regret, there's gonna be tiredness. So number one is decompressing and giving yourself time to recharge and refine yourself a little bit and give yourself a needed break, which the squad actually had an extended break because in the winter, because of the weather, the trials I think were meant to be finished, were meant to be like back in the last year.
Yeah,
They got delayed. So the decompression is number one. You only say 24 hours, but from a tournament perspective, it can actually take sometimes months to refine yourself and re-energize yourself. And I remember some players saying that they were absolutely knackered because of how much they put into these experiences. Once you
totally. Yeah,
once you've done that, then the step is then going right. The next step is to and we'll get another part we're big on in the team coach show was a strength based culture. Going right, what am I really proud of? What and we use big on that gratitude and strength spotting. So what we good at, what we were good at, what am I proud of that I did in that experience? And then that builds the foundation. Okay, go into the next thing. I want to keep using that to be using for templates for success. And then finally, once you've kind of done that bit and re-energize yourself and feel positive again, you then move into okay, what does it need enhancing? Like I mentioned earlier on, I'm very big on language. I don't think about weaknesses. I just go right. That needs further enhancing. It can be good. The problem is probably consistency. So what can we do to make it more consistent? And then that'll be the final step because then you go right to make it more consistent. What needs to happen from a process point of view with the team and train and extra stuff that you do to ensure that those things become a strength, like the things you've identified from the last tournament.
thank you.
I hope that makes sense.
No,
Yeah, no,
it's
totally.
just
Yeah,
it's like it's the it's like deliberate silence while my brain like processes,
it's
you know.
we
Um,
you you ask a very simple question, and of course, speaking to a sports psychologist, it's not a very simple answer, you know. So
Yeah, I should have realised that. Apologies, I should
no,
minimise my
no, not
mistake.
at all. Like these things are really important, and I think, like as I said, alluded to earlier, it's not spoke about enough. And a lot of people, a lot of athletes in our community don't have the tools they need to deal with this. So this information is invaluable to a lot of people in the community.
Great.
Um, one sort of final question on the sports psychology front of myself. Like we've had athletes, big named athletes recently. Shorty Brown, who was a centre at the Euros in Limerick, and Kelly Barrett, who obviously won gold at the last Euros, have stepped away due to long term injuries and illness. But what about coming from a personal point of view, when I was 16, 17, I was one of the best triple jumpers in Scotland.
Wow.
And then I got a cartilage injury, and I was pretty much told that I'd never going to be able to jump again. I'd never be able to do sport again.
Mm,
And at 16 years old, that was devastating to me because
mm,
sport was my whole life.
mm.
How would you approach an athlete who's recently been injured or recently decided to step away from the sport to try and help them?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not. I think it's not an easy thing. So you can't expect someone to just feel positive and go and just accept something like that
Yeah,
because their whole identity is constructed around being an athlete, especially at 16 when you're still psychologically developing. For me, it is actually step number one would be normalizing those initial feelings that you experience. That it's okay to feel upset, feel lost, feel worried, all those uncomfortable feelings because it was something that was important to you. And you can't expect yourself to suddenly shift into a new change if you've not, especially if you're not prepared for it or weren't expecting it the brain hasn't got the knowledge to do that. So you need to normalize and tell yourself that it's okay to feel that way. Give yourself time and space to express those emotions and however you feel is the best way to do that. Obviously, if they don't know how to do that, then that's what sports psychologist comes in and helps them determine and learn, whether that be journaling, talking to someone, recording it on a camera, physically doing stuff to kind of manage their emotions. They learn how to express it. By expressing it, you can then start to accept what's happening. The next step then is then to bring about self-compassion and appreciation, or again, I'm big on gratitude. Appreciate kind of the great moments you had in that career, whether it was short or long. But there were great moments, and you're allowed, and you should encourage yourself to go back into those memories once you're ready, but to appreciate it because it's always going to be a chapter of your life.
Yeah.
But you've got new chapters that could happen as well that could be even better than the current story. So for me, normalization, compassion, and gratitude are big things that can help make the journey a little bit more comfortable. And then once you're ready, then it's then starting to have experiments and explore what is those next steps. But you want to do it gradually and give yourself the time that you need to move on.
Yeah, it's like rehabbing is everyone's immediate thought when they get injured in a sport, and nobody really takes time to consider the impact of them, like mentally. If I couldn't go and run about in a pitch for 2 hours a week, or then go and help, like go and coach the kids, I'd be lost. I'm pretty sure Gemma would string me up and kick me out. But like a lot of people don't really take the time to think about the mental impact that it's going to have on them when they get injured and when they're going to be out of the sport for a prolonged period of time. So
yeah, exactly. So that's why compassion and giving yourself space to feel those things and know it's okay is powerful. And I think as well, I always encourage athletes and injured athletes in particular to get what we call relatable support. The idea is speak to someone else that's also been injured, because that again can also normalize what you're feeling and also as well give you hope. I think that
yeah,
can be really, really, really powerful to help navigate those early moments, those early difficult moments when you're transitioning into a part of your life that you weren't expecting to deal with.
Yeah, the rehab one is certainly one that I'm going to touch all of the wood in my room. I've not had the major one for
But I
quite
can
some
relate.
time. So
As a young athlete, I was out for about 18 months on and off. So again, it's funny when you think about me as an athlete and the need of a sports psychologist. I never had it. But again, that was back in like the late noughties where sports psychology was around, but it wasn't common, especially at kind of grassroots.
I think that's an interesting thing as well. Like for a long time, I think sports psychology was something that you only learned about or had access to once you were like already an elite athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
But now, thanks to the internet, books, like whatever, it's a lot more accessible. You and there will always be a need for for sports psychology like practitioners, but like the language around it
Yeah,
is something that I think people are picking up on at the grassroots level. And you're seeing, I mean, in most sports, grassroots sport at any level is probably the highest level
yeah,
it's been at in quite some time.
yeah,
Just because people find it personally interesting and kind
exactly.
of apply it themselves.
so beneficial. It's so
It is,
beneficial.
and you know what though?
Yeah.
Psychology is just having a conversation. Purely by looking at something, talking about it, that will make a difference. And I always say my job as a sports psych is just to help someone better understand themselves, and that can give them their own solutions. I empower them to use it, and then off they go. They become their own psychologist. It's not always about
Yeah.
necessarily the generic mental skills that you may read around imagery or self-talk or breathing. It's how you look at it, how you understand it, and how you use that information to then help you move forward.
Yeah. I had this, like, when I was kind of in my running was first, you know, you'll have certainly been there, Casper. Like you go out too fast, right? You
Yeah,
go out too fast and you are dying.
yeah.
I came up with this. It was three. It was like a 1, a 2, and a 3, and it was basically in my head for about half an hour. I just repeated in my head like, "You're good. This is comfy. Everything is fine."
I love it.
When actually, I think I was at like 176 of a heart rate. Like I was like zone 5 for half an
Yeah,
hour.
yeah,
Like just about spewed when I crossed the line. But I mean, it slowed my brain down
yeah,
to stop thinking about like the guy over my shoulder and just like imminent blackout.
yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's funny that like that was like a 10k community, 10k in the Highlands. Like
Yeah, exactly.
wasn't elite level sport, but yeah, I was good that day. So
Good. I'm glad. And again, that's
so
what athletes want. They want to have more days like that. It's not easy to
yeah.
achieve that.
No, it's not easy. And so earlier on, we spoke a little bit about the kind of, Cammy mentioned the flag football community, and that's an excellent segue to our final question. So we did ask on Instagram earlier on for some questions for you, and I'm going to go with we'll finish close to where we started with Liam Harper, who sent in a question saying, which book or books would you recommend for those looking to improve their mental skills?
Do you know what, right? It's a book that I bought a long, long time ago at the training site, and it was a book that I felt the way it was written, it offers a load of great strategies that you don't need to be sports site. So it's called The Champion's Mind, and it's by a guy called Jim Afrano. Afrano? Again, I'm looking at the book in front of me because I always forget the authors. But yeah, The Champion's Mind by Jim Afrano. He's also got an app as well that he created. But he just runs through these great different strategies and he frames it in a way that makes it super easy. And it's great for someone, whether you're getting into psychology for the first time, want to better your performance, or someone that's a bit more experienced. Because there's things that I've taken from that book that I still use now. And he just framed it in a way which was super, super easy and really, really powerful. Again, the books, I got the book 10 years ago, but you could buy it for a few quid. And
Yeah.
it honestly is a really great starter book that you could use.
Well, that's brilliant. We'll add that to our the Way We HNC It book club, because both Dale and Alan Young have given us recommendations in the past. So
Fantastic.
we'll add The Champion's Mind.
There's another one as well that I'd
to
recommend.
the book club.
I forgot to say, it's called Think Like a Warrior. It's by a guy called Darren Donnelly. So the reason I like it so much is a term that I used with the team was the thing called warrior mindset, because you can either be a warrior or a warrior. And then I
Okay.
found the book Think Like a Warrior. I was like, you know what, that just aligns to who I'm about. So it's another great little book, very easy read. Again, it's just about how you can, I guess, metaphorically go into performance, how you feel like a warrior and put on that armor that so you feel like indestructible, you feel really robust. It's a really nice little, nice easy read to have as well.
Nice one. Okay, so The Champion's Mind and Think Like a Warrior. That's the next two on our The Way We HNC It book club. And I think we will draw it to an end there, Casper. We are almost half an hour over what we promised. But thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Honestly, this has been long overdue in the community. There's a lot of people that I'm quite open and public about my struggles with the mental side of sport, and a lot of people come to me and I don't have the answers for them. So when Bez told me that this was going on, I was like, yes, I am in 100%. Like, so thank you so much for your time. Both of us really appreciate it, and so will the wider community. So
been a pleasure.
Yes, no, thank you very much. And yes, that is the end of our show for this week. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending your time with us. As always, next week we are going to come back and it's going to get very real in the National Flag Football League, because as of Monday, it is NFFL Week 1. The BAFA leagues are back and we will be moving towards crowning our 2025 national champions, and the Women's Flag Football League finals are just around the corner. So it is goodbye from all of us. Thank you once again for listening. We'll see you soon, and that is The Way We HNC It.